What's up, everybody? D-Man back, and hello, loyal listeners. Welcome back to another episode of the Titan Truth Podcast. That's right, everybody. We are going full Bernie Hayes on this one. We are diving in deep to the MonsterVerse lore. We will be seeking to uncover and explain some of the bigger glaring continuity errors within the MonsterVerse through the lens of everything that's come since. In particular, in this video, we will be discussing how Monarch Legacy of Monsters unknowingly cleared up some of the MonsterVerse's biggest and longest running continuity errors to date. That's right, everybody. In this one, we're going full MonsterVerse conspiracy mode, diving in deep to the lore and figuring out exactly what happened. Now, I've got to connect some dots here that I'm not even sure if the filmmakers exactly have connected themselves yet, but this all does make complete sense within canon, and so I want to dive on in to discuss how the Monarch Legacy of Monsters retcons accidentally fixed one of the MonsterVerse's longest-running continuity errors that originally was caused by Godzilla Awakening. After Joe Brody dies about 45 minutes into Godzilla 2014, Serizawa briefs Ford about the Monarch organization, and in this scene, this has been the source of much debate ever since 2014, as this was riddled with continuity errors even at the time it came out. That's a direct result of Godzilla Awakening, the comic book prequel to Godzilla 2014, having almost nothing to do with the MonsterVerse itself and yet still calling itself canon. But with Monarch Legacy of Monsters completely obliterating that comic book from canon, a lot of the continuity errors created by that comic have been cleared up. The biggest and most glaring example of that is the idea that Godzilla was only ever hit with one nuclear bomb, and that was the nuke used against him in 1954, the infamous Castle Bravo test, the one we see at the start of the 2014 film. According to Godzilla Awakening, that was the only time Godzilla was ever seen before the present day of 2014. However, in Godzilla 2014, we have information that directly conflicts with that, and as we all know, film canon supersedes all other canon, so that's the number one source here. But even given that, it's now been completely rectified by Monarch Legacy of Monsters without the show meaning to do that intentionally, or at least I don't think they did. In Godzilla King of the Monsters, we learn that Dr. Serizawa is the director and leader of Monarch. That means that the information he's passing down should be legit. Serizawa has access to all of Monarch's files, all of their history, all of their info. Now, in Godzilla X Kong: The New Empire, we learned that there are apparently, according to Bernie Hayes, some glaring issues within Monarch's library and history. I don't really take that to mean much. Bernie's conspiracy theories are so ridiculous, it's not even like he knows what's up most of the time. Even director Adam Wingard has confirmed that Bernie's theories about the telepathic connection between two Ghidorah skulls, one in Apex headquarters and then one in Mechagodzilla's head, isn't even correct. There is only one Ghidorah head that survived the events of Godzilla King of the Monsters, and the telepathic link doesn't work the way Bernie thinks it does. Bernie's theories are not always right. So Bernie saying that there's glaring issues in their library doesn't mean much, but it is something to note. Maybe there really are some histories that have been covered up that Monarch isn't even aware of, that even Serizawa wouldn't know about because they've been completely deleted files. But I don't think that's what's happening here. Serizawa tells us that in 1954, the first time the USS Nautilus, the first nuclear sub to ever reach the lower depths, did just that. It awakened something, that being Godzilla. This makes sense given that the Titans burrowed into the Hollow Earth to hibernate after the surface became less radioactive. I'm not sure why Godzilla wouldn't have returned to his temple where he could soak up all the radiation he wanted, but for one reason or another, it seems that Godzilla's at his lowest power state in the MonsterVerse going into the events of 2014, meaning he probably hibernated somewhere other than his temple. But even if he did hibernate in his temple, the radiation from the submarine still got his attention and he still did surface. It's possible that even if he was being replenished by the radiation from his Hollow Earth temple, Godzilla still got up to investigate what was going on because he may have thought a Titan awakened. He could sense the radiation, so he was going after it. In Monarch Legacy of Monsters, Godzilla responds to false gamma bursts created by a device by Dr. Suzuki, in which case Godzilla thought it was a Titan when it really wasn't. Now, in the 2014 film, we're told that the Russians and Americans first thought each other was to blame for Godzilla, only to later realize that it was Godzilla behind it all, but we're not told when they realized this. The film implies that it's before they bomb him, they realize it, which is the decision to bomb Godzilla, but that doesn't have to be the case. All we know is that eventually the Castle Bravo hydrogen bomb test was used against Godzilla in March of 1954. 1954. Dr. Graham says that the nuclear tests in the 1950s weren't tests. They were trying to kill Godzilla, and that's backed up in Kong Skull Island by Bill Randa. Dr. Graham tells Ford that Monarch was established in the wake of this discovery as a multinational coalition formed in secrecy to search for, study, and learn everything they could about Godzilla. This discovery is a pretty vague term. This discovery could be what it seems to be implied in the film, the awakening of Godzilla, or it could be the discovery that Titans exist, which would go along with the actual canon of the MonsterVerse. Now, Godzilla Awakening had a very different origin for Monarch. It actually had nothing to do with Godzilla. Godzilla was already awakened by the 1945 nuclear bombing of Hiroshima, in which Godzilla woke up because the bomb surfaced a parasitic titan called Shinomura that Godzilla was on the hunt for. In this timeline, Monarch was made in order to hunt Shinomura, and Godzilla was more of a conspiracy theory later turned reality that nobody really believed in. Here, Monarch was founded as an army unit in 1946, but none of that matters anymore after Monarch Legacy of Monsters completely struck that comic from canon. And the biggest example of that is when they took Lee Shaw from that comic and created a brand new character with him. Also, Monarch's origins here are very different. Also, they're not hunting for Shinomura. Also, there's no E.G. Serizawa that we've met. It's just a very different organization. They've completely changed it. That timeline is gone. The Godzilla Awakening timeline is a separate timeline from the MonsterVerse itself, okay? That's the truth. You can deny it, Legendary can deny it, but you know why Legendary is going to deny it? Because they want you to buy the comic book and they think you're a sucker enough to fall for it. It is a separate timeline, just that's the truth. There might be some things from it that they'll eventually pull into canon, like E.G. Serizawa, I do believe is still considered canon. E.G. is Dr. Serizawa's father. He was a Monarch founding member. Eventually, Serizawa himself got involved in Monarch due to his father. I think that's all still canon, but the rest of it completely obliterated by this show. And as we know, show canon supersedes comic canon. In Kong Skull Island, we're given a bit of a different origin for Monarch. We learned that President Truman founded Monarch in 1946 with Bill Randa as one of the founding members after he was the only survivor of the 1943 Titan attack on the USS Loudon. Monarch Legacy of Monsters doubles down on this and confirms and reveals that the Loudon wasn't attacked by Godzilla, but rather the Ion Dragon. This fixes one of the other continuity errors people had, which is if Godzilla was awakened in 1954, how did he sink the Loudon? Well, Jordan Vogt Roberts never wanted Godzilla to be the one that sunk the Loudon in the first place, and Monarch Legacy of Monsters has now given us an answer. The Titan that sunk the Loudon was the Ion Dragon, a Titan that wouldn't catch Godzilla's attention because it's not a worldwide threat, and it doesn't disturb the balance of nature. Therefore, Godzilla is allowed to remain in hibernation without responding to a threat before 1954. Now, why would Dr. Graham imply in Godzilla 2014 that Monarch was founded in 1954? I think that there's a couple reasons for this. Number one is the least likely, and that's maybe she doesn't know the truth. Maybe she is not high enough clearance to know that Monarch really was around since 1946. I don't think that's the case, though. I think this is a public answer, something they're implying. They don't outright state it, they're just implying it for Ford, and I think it's a public answer so that they can keep the remaining Titans a secret. They don't want to be like, hey Ford, there is an Ion Dragon out there as well, by the way. We don't even know what happened to it. It disappeared. They don't want to do that. They don't want him to know that. This keeps Ford's focus on Godzilla rather than the rest of the Titans that exist. It also doesn't reveal more to Ford than anything he's already learned on his own. He doesn't really know about Godzilla himself, but he does know about the Mutos. So by revealing Godzilla, what they're trying to do is get Ford to confirm Godzilla's existence. They think Joe knows that Godzilla's out there, and they're trying to get Ford to confirm that for them. That's why they reveal it to him. They're trying to keep Ford a non-security risk. They don't want to put him in secure asset management after all. They want to keep him free and in the public. They want him to go back home. So they're only giving him the information he already knows or information they're hoping he can provide them with. I also think it's still kind of the truth in a way. In 1954, Monarch was expanded from a very small scientific committee, no longer a military operation. It is a scientific committee first, military operation second. Because Awakening has been obliterated from canon, that actually makes sense. Monarch was expanded from a small scientific committee to an international organization upon the government's realization that Godzilla is real. This is seen in Monarch's 6th episode as they go to Japan to recruit another scientist. The only other Titans that Ford is briefed on in this speech is the Godzilla Bones, because that one's dead. The one in the Philippines, it's already dead, no threat there. And now the active and presently threatening Mutos, which Ford has already come face to face with one of them, and they don't even know the other one's awake yet, so they don't even tell him about the other one. So why does Monarch Legacy of Monsters conflict with all of this? Like, I was really heavily critical of Monarch Legacy of Monsters when I watched the show because it had a lot of seeming continuity errors. This is where I'm gonna kind of connect some dots that I'm not even sure if the filmmakers connected, because the MonsterVerse canon actually is intact. I just don't even know if they're aware of that, because I don't know if they knew that they were creating issues in the first place. Monarch uncovers the Godzilla footprint 3 weeks before presenting it to the government. They first found it in Indonesia and presented to the government in 1954. This gives Godzilla at least 3 weeks of being active before he's nuked. The Nautilus was first launched on January 21st, 1954 for a test run, allowing for just a few months' time between then and the March 1st Castle Bravo nuclear strike on Godzilla, which means there is plenty of time for Godzilla to surface in Indonesia, leave a footprint, Monarch to find it, and then present it to the government, and then the government rapidly responds with a very fast test immediately afterward to blow Godzilla up. There's no time in between. Happens just days later, it seems. In this time, the US and the Russians were both encountering Godzilla without understanding what they were encountering. They didn't know it was Godzilla. It was only in retrospect after the Castle Bravo bombing that they were able to put the pieces together to realize it was Godzilla they were encountering. Now Dr. Graham and Serizawa's story makes sense. The US responds by nuking Godzilla, and that was the only time Godzilla was nuked in canon, at least according to Godzilla Awakening, which now no longer exists. Monarch then learns in 1955 that Godzilla is still alive, and Lee Shaw passes on the report that Godzilla survived later that year to General Puckett, who tells the US government as a way to keep funding for Monarch and as a way to keep searching for Godzilla. The government's natural response would be to continue nuking Godzilla, or at least trying to. They're gonna nuke him as many times as they can before Godzilla goes to sleep for however long he goes to sleep for. We actually don't know how long he was active before 2014, but we do know he goes back to bed at some point. Or the government just continues tests, blowing up nukes out in the ocean as a way to try and lure Godzilla out. Maybe they're trying to get him out there, maybe they're trying to create more efficient bombs that can take Godzilla down better, and maybe Godzilla just doesn't take the bait. So if the March 1st Castle Bravo test is the only one used against him, continuity's mostly intact. The only issue that creates is with the Godzilla 2014 intro, which does imply multiple tests were used against Godzilla. Now, the intro actually implies that Monarch was studying Godzilla before the Castle Bravo tests, and I'm gonna say they absolutely were. Monarch Legacy of Monsters trio just wasn't a part of it. I don't know what they were doing, but they just weren't a part of it. The footage they gather on Godzilla, it just has to have happened before, because a soldier paints Godzilla on the nuke before they ever even see what he looks like. Why General Puckett and all of the Monarch trio that we are introduced to haven't seen Godzilla yet before the Castle Bravo test, I don't know. Maybe the other soldiers have seen him out there. That is still an issue. Why does the soldier paint Godzilla if he's never seen him? I don't know. Other than that, the rest of it makes complete sense. Even if we're to say that nobody has seen Godzilla before the test, maybe the footage from 2014 was sourced from later Godzilla strikes. It wouldn't be uncommon for this to be an out-of-order narrative. In fact, the nuke map that they set up with all those wires and stuff, that actually doesn't even match the layout of Bikini Atoll itself. Much like how multiple nuke tests are showing during the detonation, which is just there to imply that many nukes were used against Godzilla, despite the fact that some of these nukes were actually detonated in the 40s rather than the 50s. None of those bombs are Castle Bravo. The only Castle Bravo is the footage created with CGI that shows either the bomb or the people watching the bomb. Other than that, it's all actual sourced footage from different nuke tests that happened either before or after Godzilla, so I don't know what's up with that. But the point is, multiple nuke tests were used against Godzilla. It now makes sense. The footage that is creating that intro for Godzilla 2014 doesn't have to be from 1954. It doesn't have to be linear. It could be from all over the 50s and then just stitched together to present us a cool intro for the movie. Am I thinking way too hard about this? I don't know. I like to have fun with the MonsterVerse, and their lack of attention to detail with the lore sometimes really frustrates me, so I'm here to fix it for them. It makes sense, you guys. The only issue we've created is why did that one soldier know how to paint Godzilla before he's seen him? And I'm just gonna say, some of the soldiers have seen him, some Monarch guys have seen him, but most people like General Puckett and them didn't believe it. Or at least at the very least, they didn't know what to expect. And so that's why they're all so surprised when Godzilla actually does show up. And that's why we're gonna say that our main trio was surprised too, because they were so busy with General Puckett's side of things. They didn't have time to go on the search for Godzilla like the rest of Monarch was up to. We don't even know what the rest of Monarch looks like in Monarch Legacy of Monsters. We just know it exists. Bill Randa says that there are more people out there, but we haven't met them yet. That's my big Bernie Hayes rant. I hope you enjoyed. I'd love to find more continuity that I could fix for the MonsterVerse moving forward. I'll keep looking because I really do love to engage with the lore of the MonsterVerse, and it really frustrates me when there are holes. So I'll do my best to continue trying to patch them the way that only Bernie Hayes would. As always, I want to give a huge thank you to my patrons over on Patreon. If you want to check out the Patreon, you can use the link in the description below, where you can get early access to content, access to the Discord community, and more. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I will see you guys next time for the next one. D-Man out.